More than with any other text, past exam questions on Macbeth have included the words male or female in them, and yet a number of exam reports have pointed out that making sweeping generalisations about all women or all men in Shakespearean England is not helpful. So what do? One approach was pointed out in the 2020 exam report, which stated that it's a good idea to ground your context analysis within the text itself. So what does that mean? Well, rather than write about the role of men or women in Jacobean England, we look at the role of men or women as it's presented in the play Macbeth and base our answers on that. And when we do that, a fascinating, complex picture begins to emerge. Everything I'm about to go through in this video can be found in the 3rd edition of my literature guide, linked in the description. Now let me say at this point that one of the beauties of Shakespeare is the way you can so often interpret things in two totally different ways and they both make sense. So if you don't agree with something I'm about to say, it doesn't mean that you're wrong or I'm wrong. It's all open to discussion, and I encourage you to put your comments in the comment section. Let's make that comment section a powerful resource for future viewers. Let's start then by looking at how women are presented in the play, and remember, we're solely looking at evidence found within this book. Imagine we know nothing about Shakespearean England. When Lady Macbeth calls on the spirits to unsex me here in Act 1 Scene 5, she believes she must reject her femininity in order to carry out a violent and ruthless act, and that implies that being a woman is associated with being compassionate, gentle, and weak. When Macduff discovers Duncan's murdered body in Act 2 Scene 3, he tells Lady Macbeth that the news is too horrible for a woman to hear, saying the repetition in a woman's ear would murder as it fell, and this suggests that women are seen as fragile and sheltered because Macduff assumes that a woman could not emotionally cope with the brutality of the news, reinforcing the stereotype that women are too delicate for harsh truths or violent realities. When Macduff learns of the murder of his wife and children, he says in Act 4 Scene 3, "I could play the woman with mine eyes," which presents women as emotional and performative because he links crying with acting like a woman, suggesting that open displays of grief are not masculine, and that expressing emotion is something associated with female behaviour, possibly even seen as theatrical or excessive. In the same scene, when Ross describes the chaos and suffering in Scotland under Macbeth's rule, he says that things are so bad it would make our women fight, and this presents women as peaceful and weak because it implies it's unnatural or shocking for women to engage in violence, so the fact that even they would take up arms shows how far the country's fallen into disorder. When Lady Macduff says he loves us not, all is the fear and nothing is the love in Act 4 Scene 2, she feels abandoned by her husband who's fled to England, and this presents women as emotionally dependent on men and reliant on their protection and loyalty. And so within the world of the play, women are presented as compassionate, gentle, weak, fragile, sheltered, and peaceful. And into this comes Lady Macbeth, who at least initially challenges these stereotypes. Rather than being compassionate and gentle, Lady Macbeth demonstrates ruthless ambition and emotional manipulation. When she questions Macbeth by asking, "Was the hope drunk wherein you dressed yourself?" in Act 1 Scene 7, she shows herself to be psychologically cunning rather than emotionally dependent. Her famous manipulation, "When you durst do it, then you were a man," reveals her understanding of masculine pride, and it can be argued that she is the force behind Duncan's murder rather than a passive, sheltered figure. But look what happens to Lady Macbeth as the play progresses. Her fall into insanity and eventual suicide seem to associate female ambition and independence with chaos and destruction, acting as a warning to women who overstep the boundaries of their prescribed roles. But here's where, for me, things get really interesting. If Lady Macbeth is a cautionary tale of what happens to women who overstep the limits of their role, what about Lady Macduff? Lady Macduff appears very briefly in the play, making her single appearance in Act 4 Scene 2. Now, Dr. Emma Smith, who gave me some great feedback when I was planning this video, spoke about this in a 2020 Radio 4 episode of In Our Time. Smith said, "There's no point in introducing Lady Macduff as a new character in Act 4. That's playwriting 101. So what is the function of Lady Macduff? Well, for one, she's a foil for Lady Macbeth in the way she does, in many ways, conform to the expected role of a woman. She's nurturing and protective as a mother, emotionally vulnerable about her husband's absence, and ultimately powerless to defend herself against male violence. Where Lady Macbeth manipulates and commands, Lady Macduff pleads and questions. When Lady Macduff asks Ross what had he done to make him fly the land, she demonstrates the confusion and helplessness that the play associates with women. So if Lady Macduff fulfills the role expected of women in the play, in that she's a devoted mother, emotionally dependent wife and non-violent presence, shouldn't she therefore theoretically be safe within the play's moral framework? But the reality is her brutal murder alongside her innocent child reveals that conforming to the expected role of a woman in the play offers no protection. If Lady Macbeth's subversion of female boundaries leads to madness and suicide, and Lady Macduff's conformity to those same boundaries leads to her own murder, then what's the message? Shakespeare is presenting women as being trapped within an impossible paradox where there is no correct way to behave that guarantees safety or happiness. If we look at both characters together, the play suggests that women are doomed whether they challenge or embrace their prescribed roles, making them victims not of their individual choices, but of a fundamentally flawed system. And this is incredibly clever from Shakespeare because it suggests that the problem lies not within women's behaviour, but within the oppressive structures that constrain and ultimately destroy them, regardless of their actions. Now, you might say, well, I don't think Lady Macduff is conforming to female boundaries fully. Shakespeare also gives her a strong wit and defiance. When she tells her son that his father is dead because he loves us not, and declares that all is the fear and nothing is the love, Lady Macduff is not expressing helpless emotional dependence, but moral judgment. Her conversation with her son demonstrates active criticism of masculine failure. She holds Macduff accountable for abandoning his protective duties and questions his love and loyalty. And this is not the voice of passive conformity, but of a woman who expected protection and is disgusted to find that she's abandoned by her husband. However, this reading of Lady Macduff only strengthens the impossible paradox facing women in the play. If Lady Macbeth's autonomy and ambition leads to destruction, and Lady Macduff's moral criticism of masculine failure also leads to brutal murder, then Shakespeare reveals that women are doomed whether they challenge boundaries or hold men accountable within them. The system destroys women whether they seek power, like Lady Macbeth, or demand responsibility from those who possess it, like Lady Macduff. In this way, Shakespeare reveals that the question is not what women should do to survive, but whether a system that offers them no viable path to survival deserves to exist at all. Now, if that's what the play tells us about women, what does it say about men? Well, again, we'll take the same approach, rooting our analysis within the text itself. In Act 1, Scene 2, the sergeant arrives bleeding from battle, and his wounds are said to smack of honour. The idea that physical injury and suffering are signs of greatness reveals a brutal expectation placed on men that violence is not only necessary but honourable. Macbeth is described as brave Macbeth who unseamed his enemy from the nave to the chaps, and Duncan responds with admiration, "O valiant cousin, worthy gentleman." In this world, then, the ideal man is one who proves himself through strength, violence and loyalty in war. Masculinity is linked to brutality, and killing in battle is glorified. Lady Macbeth's "Unsex me here" speech in Act 1, Scene 5 suggests that men are ruthless. The qualities she believes she needs, cruelty and ambition, are associated with masculinity, and this suggests that to commit acts of violence and power, she must abandon feminine traits and embody stereotypically male ones, being cold, calculated and fearless. Lady Macbeth's "When you durst do it, then you were a man" in Act 1, Scene 7 suggests men are daring and decisive. Her criticism to Macbeth when he sees Banquo's ghost is "Are you a man?" in Act 3, Scene 4, which suggests that men are expected to be unemotional. In Act 5, after young Seward has died in battle, Ross says he died like a man. Seward died facing the enemy with wounds on his front rather than his back, and dying honourably in combat rather than showing weakness by running away and therefore being stabbed in the back whilst you run away is seen as the ultimate proof of manhood. So once again, masculinity is defined in terms of physical courage and loyalty to a violent cause. So the play presents a world where men are expected to be brave, violent, ruthless, daring and decisive, but here's where things become complex. Macbeth himself perfectly embodies these masculine expectations, yet they lead directly to his downfall. Macbeth is undeniably brave. The bloody sergeant praises his battlefield courage and he continues to fight even when facing certain defeat. He becomes increasingly violent, from unseeming enemies in battle to organising multiple murders. He demonstrates ambition in going after the crown, shows bravery in his willingness to act on the witch's prophecies, and makes decisive choices throughout the play. But rather than securing his position, these are the very character traits that ultimately destroy him. So what are we supposed to make of this? Perhaps Shakespeare's criticising the model of masculinity that the play initially appears to celebrate. Macbeth's tragedy lies not in his failure to be masculine enough, but in his perfect embodiment of masculinity. The qualities that make him a celebrated warrior prove catastrophic when applied to kingship and domestic life. So let's recap where we're at. Through the impossible paradox facing women, where both Lady Macbeth's subversion and Lady Macduff's conformity lead to destruction, Shakespeare seems to be saying the problem isn't with individual women's choices, but with the oppressive structures that constrain them. No matter how women behave, the system destroys them. Similarly, through Macbeth's perfect embodiment of masculine ideals leading to his downfall, Shakespeare perhaps suggests that traditional masculine values, when taken to their logical conclusion, are destructive. The very qualities the world of the play celebrates in men, violence, ruthlessness, emotional suppression, become the instruments of their own destruction. But here's where it again gets really interesting. If both traditional femininity and traditional masculinity are presented as traps, what's the alternative? The play offers glimpses. In Act 1, Scene 7, responding to Lady Macbeth's manipulation, Macbeth says, "Prithee peace, I dare do all that may become a man, who dares do more is none." Macbeth here puts a limit on masculinity, suggesting there is a boundary to what actions can be justified under the label of masculinity. Being a man is not about unrestrained violence or reckless ambition, but about honour and restraint. And in Act 4, Scene 3, when upset over the death of his wife and children, Macduff is challenged by Malcolm, who tells him, "Dispute it like a man." Macduff replies, "I shall do so, but I must also feel it as a man." So through Macduff, Shakespeare seems to be offering a more nuanced understanding of masculinity, one that includes emotional expressiveness and vulnerability alongside strength and action. And all that is context firmly grounded in the text itself. We're not talking about Shakespearean England, we're talking about this book and this book alone. Now, this is the first in a new series, so if you found this video useful, please do give it a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. And also let me point out that you can get my literature guide, which contains all of these notes, free when you buy my language and poetry guide. So those are ebooks. If you follow the link in the description, you can pick those up today. If you want paperbacks, they're available on Amazon. But I hope you found this video useful. If you did, please do subscribe.